think we'll get started. Got a full house tonight. Thank you for coming. And welcome to our Advanced Nuclear 101 panel here at Clarkson University. Little housekeeping. This night was organized by State Assemblyman Scott Gray, I believe right up there. Thank you. As well as Kelly Chesum, Susan Powers, and Leo Jiang of Clarkson University. We are also honored to have State Senator Dan Steck here, who I believe is an alumnus of Clarkson. I think he's here somewhere. And also some members of NYSERDA, thank you for joining us. We are assisted by the generosity of many, many volunteers, including those from Nuclear New York, Citizens Climate Lobby, Mothers for Nuclear, We Planet, and NICE, that is an acronym, Nuclear is Clean Energy, NICE Columbia, and NICE Cornell. The kids drove many hours from their respective universities, so thank you for showing up. My name is Eric Dawson. I'm from Nuclear New York. We are a not-for-profit pro-nuclear environmentalist group, and some people are a little confused by that, but we feel that expanding nuclear energy is actually the best thing for the environment, but it is a bit of a contentious issue. Many older legacy environmentalist groups remain opposed to nuclear energy, and so that's why we're here, to give you our argument, and you can think about it. As Kelly mentioned, we very much welcome disagreement and debate, but we ask that you do so respectfully. This looks like a pretty rough crowd, so I thought I needed to make that disclaimer. Just to give you a little quick timeline about nuclear. Nuclear energy was actually a lot less popular in the US and abroad even just 5 years ago, but there's been a kind of inflection point in the 2020s. So just to go over a quick timeline, I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know, there has been a failure to reach a lot of the popular climate goals of the last few years. In addition, we had the COVID pandemic and supply chain bottlenecks, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the growth of Chinese global manufacturing and China becoming more hawkish, inflation spiking, especially electricity prices, and the push for electrifying everything, including vehicles and buildings and heavy machinery. And then in the last couple of years, if you follow markets at all, it's hard to ignore that you see AI and data centers, semiconductor chip fabs, desalination plants. You even hear about lab-grown meat and hydrogen electrolyzers and hydrogen fuel cells and carbon capture and sequestration. And all of these have one thing in common. They require a huge growing amount of reliable electricity. And so the question is, where are we going to get the juice? And so because of all of this demand growing, there has been a great bipartisan support for nuclear, both in the US and in Europe and elsewhere. Just recently, it was announced last year that 3 Mile Island, a formerly decommissioned nuclear plant in Pennsylvania, is now going to be restarted, along with Palisades, another nuclear plant in Michigan, going to be restarted. Last year, global nuclear power generation actually hit a record high. It's 2,700 terawatt hours, in case you want to know, mostly from China, but also elsewhere. And there are 71 new nuclear reactors under construction in the world. And this year, if you look at the stock market, everybody talks about the Magnificent Seven, the big tech companies, AI, data centers, semiconductors. Actually, nuclear stocks have outpaced all of them, again, because they require a growing amount of electricity, and it's just going to grow in the future. And so people are betting more and more on nuclear. And right here in New York, we have a little brief timeline. This is just the last couple years. Last year, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, NYSERDA, hosted a Future Energy Economy Summit in Syracuse, attended by many of us, addressed by Governor Hochul, at which they issued a draft blueprint for consideration of advanced nuclear technologies. And it's quite a mouthful, but it represents a major shift in policy of the last few years in a pro-nuclear direction. And just this year, a master plan for responsible advanced nuclear development in New York is being developed as we speak. Mostly based on what was discovered in the blueprint and making recommendations. New York has also joined a multi-state consortium and first movers initiative that includes states like New York, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Wyoming, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Utah, Virginia, and West Virginia to develop policies, public-private partnerships, and different ways of financing new nuclear plants. Last summer, Governor Hochul directed the New York Power Authority, NYPA, to build at least 1 gigawatt of new nuclear power here in upstate New York. And most recently, 2 groups of RFIs were issued. These are requests for information, and they're from NYSERDA and NYPA, but the gist is there's 2 topics. It is looking for potential vendors and potential host communities. that host communities aspect is why we're here. And so we just want to inform the public as best as we can. And basically, nobody wants to build a plant where most people don't want it. And we want to give you our argument of why we think it can help communities. And these guys will tell you a lot more detailed information, but if I leave you with nothing else, there's a fun tidbit. I'm from New York City, and I love coming to upstate New York. I think it's the most beautiful place. And you sometimes encounter some snobbiness from people downstate in New York, and they say, oh, upstate, do they even have electricity up there? Like, what are you doing up there? Well, you can tell them there is a phenomenon called the tale of two grids, where there's a particular cultural geographic divide, upstate, downstate. In upstate New York, you actually have a 90% zero-emission clean grid, due mostly to nuclear and hydro. Downstate New York has a 90% fossil fuel grid after shutting down all their nuclear plants. So there is a big gulf between intentions and results. So it's a fun thing to ruin a cocktail party with if you want. I wanted to also say, Joel Lalone, I believe he is here in the audience, if you want to raise your hand. Oh, you're right there. Oh, there he is, right there. He is from Jefferson Community College. We put on a very similar event last night, and he has done a number of community surveys, both in upstate and statewide, checking on how people feel about nuclear energy, and a few things popped out from his presentation I would share with you. If you want more detail, you should definitely talk to Joel after. The number one issue, of course, is pocketbook. That is electricity price inflation. Everybody's worried about that. Makes you think of the famous quote, it's the economy, stupid. That's what people care about. Among those with a strong opinion, more people in New York are now in favor of nuclear energy than against, which was interesting. I think it's a shift of the last few years. But most importantly, the vast majority of New Yorkers simply want to learn more. So again, that's our primary purpose. And so although statisticians would not approve of this, this is the worst way to do a survey. It's basically meaningless, but what the hell, why don't we try it now? So I'm going to ask you, by show of hands, do you support nuclear energy? Are you against nuclear energy? Or are you not sure? So hands for support nuclear energy. Okay, all right. Maybe it's not such a rough crowd. Nice. Okay, how about against nuclear energy? That's okay, don't be shy. Awesome, thank you for coming. And how about people who aren't sure? You're on the fence? Awesome, open-minded. All right, this is perfect. I think it's almost evenly split. So with that, I want to hand it over to our 6 eligible bachelors. No, just kidding. There are 6 nuclear experts in their own respective fields. I'm going to introduce each one one at a time, and I'm going to give these guys a tight 10-minute limit, so hopefully they don't go too far over. And then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A, and if we don't answer all your questions during the actual event, we're going to stay after so you can chat with us. So first up, we have our hometown hero. We have Tom Ortmeyer. He is a professor of electrical and computer engineering here at Clarkson University. Having received his PhD in electrical engineering from Iowa State University, his research has included all aspects of electric grid modeling, including renewable sources, EV charging demand, energy storage, and community microgrids. Tom, take it away.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate the introduction and the intro remarks. I'd like to echo Kelly's welcome to our campus. We appreciate you all being here, and we appreciate the expertise we have here. This is a good topic that we all need to know more about. I will say on behalf of the upstaters, we do propagate some of those rumors just to keep you not too close to us. Isn't that right? But welcome to campus. Also welcome to you, the Coulter School of Engineering and Applied Science, really recently reorganized, and to help our focus on topics including this, but certainly not limited to. And also to our Center for Electric Power System Research. My colleague Leo Jiang here is the director of the center now, and we are heavily involved in research on topics of this on our campus. And we have a number of synergistic projects, capabilities here that will help promote the development of clean energy in general, and including applications of nuclear. So next, charts you see are from some of these reports, mostly from New York ISO. but I do want to talk about just a brief overview of the power grid, just to set the stage for what comes after talking about the nuclear energy. Apologize for the font, it showed up bigger on my screen. But the key points, there's 3 I want to make and leave you with. Sorry, there we go. One, grid reliability is top of the list, you know. And I will say that all the power industry people I know, it's grid reliability and reasonable cost. But reliability, the most recent Northeast blackout was had a price tag in the range of what, $5 to $10 billion in dollars of those days. It would be double that now. So that's it. That's grid reliability. We also have distribution reliability. Reliability costs money. So it's always a constant. Is it, you know, how much do you spend on reliability, how much on low cost? So that's the view we have from our industry. The wind and solar clean energies are not dispatchable. The sun doesn't always shine. I think we know that. The other thing I want to bring out, the black one, this is kind of a minor thing, but wind, solar, batteries, and other new technologies connect to the grid with inverters, power electronic inverters, unlike coal, natural gas, oil, and nuclear, who connect through synchronous generators. And we're really good at operating systems with synchronous generators. We're still learning on inverter-based resources. And I will also say the last red bullet, right now, current technology, inverter-based resources, can only get penetrations levels of maybe 50%. People aren't fully in agreement, but maybe 50, 40, 50, 60%. New technology is under development, but it's not proven yet. So we do have this limit. It's probably 10 years away before that potentially could go up to 100%. This is what New York looks like to people like me. All the transmission lines here. The power grid, the bulk power grid, is pretty much operated by the New York Independent System Operator. They are charged with maintaining the reliability of the grid. So they operate reliability, and I will tell you, that is tops on their list. They operate the day-ahead market and the real-time market for energy, and they operate the capacity market that helps to ensure we have the capacity to meet the demand. So that's their role. They do it well. They're very involved in this. If you've never been to their website, it's kind of fun. This is the map of New York showing this morning's marginal cost of energy on the day-ahead market. If you look at they're all about $50 per megawatt hour, and the whole map is green. Green is good. So we're not stressed today, and you don't see much difference in cost across the state, from up where we are down to Long Island and up to Buffalo. But you dig deeper into this, and we have to serve the load, or we want to serve the load 24/7, 365. There is 1 hour in that period where we hit peak load, and we need to serve the load there. In order to do that, we make a load forecast. The current load forecast is 31,471 megawatts peak load. In order to do that reliably, we need a reserve, and our installed reserve right now this year is 76, 79 megawatts. Okay, so that's what we need. What we have is on the right. 37,699 in-state generation, about 1,500 demand response. We can shut loads down when we need to. and about 1,700 megawatts of imported power capacity. Okay? You take the difference of that, and that's about 2,000 megawatts. And that sounds pretty good until you look at that curve on the right. In 2018, that margin was 4,000. It's gone down significantly since then. Little bump there, and then back down, and now about 1,700. I know a good number of people who, frankly, don't sleep at night because of this curve. And because that's low. Okay, we are at getting to the minimum of what we need on reserves. That was made clear. Okay, the daily load curve here, base, intermittent, and peak. And we need to meet all those base load 24/7 and that, but wind doesn't blow that way. Okay, and you can see this is the monthly load. Our wind load capability is about double in the fall, winter, and spring than summer. And we just don't have the capacity now to store energy long enough to go over the seasonal changes we've got there. So what are our options? One is don't use wind PV for base load. We can use nuclear, for example, and we'll hear about that. We can overbuild wind and solar so we have enough to serve the load in those lean times. Or we can develop an affordable, scalable, seasonal storage technology. That's a big lift. People talk about hydrogen. That's a long way from that, and it's not clear it will ever become commercial. So that's the gap we're talking about. We'll talk about more the seasonal one. The daily load cycles we can solve with batteries if we want to do it that way. Solar, okay. Solar is just the worst, but New York will become winter peaking in about 15 years, and that will change a lot of things. And finally, what I want to make sure, the solar and wind are limited by intermittency. That in turn affects the cost and practicality of it. Current IBR inverter-based technology is improving, but not quite there yet. It will be, but it'll be at least a decade. And we don't have the seasonal storage capability we need to truly make wind and solar base load. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. All right, next up we have Greg. Let me get your bio out. It's very long. All right. So Greg is the president of the Central New York Building and Construction Trades Council, representing over 29,000 members, and he also oversees its apprenticeship program. He first entered the building trades in 1990 as an apprentice himself for Plumbers and Steamfitters Local 267. In addition, he is the president of the New York State Pipe Trades Association, as well as the business manager of Plumbers and Steamfitters Local 81. Greg?
Good evening, everybody. Bear with me, I'm sorry, I'm a little rough today. I don't have slides to present, so it's going to be all eyes on me, and that's not a bad thing sometimes. I represent the community that wears hard hats and carries tools and builds. And, you know, these facilities, everything else, there's a lot of workers in the construction industry in the central New York, northern New York, and we've built quite a bit of projects over time. The nuclear industry is one of the sectors of energy that we work in quite a bit. It's very robust, and we do acknowledge that to meet New York State's needs for energy, it is going to take all forms. It's going to be a solution that is all of the above. And in 2019, with the CLCPA and the decarbonization of our grid, it sounded good in theory, I guess, But what it did was it displaced a lot of workers in the traditional fossil industry. It also, ran into problems like the pandemic and supply chain and regulatory issues there. And New York, quite frankly, is falling short on its goals of having dispatchable, emission-free resources for us to live in our community, for our community to grow, and for our state to grow safely and smartly. The nuclear industry, where we fit into that, is, we haven't built reactors in quite a while, and those are older, light water reactors. And quite frankly, a lot of our members, we have year-round engagement in the nuclear industry, because when the plants go down for refueling, there's also planned maintenance and upgrades being performed at those plants by a lot of our construction workers. I am a pipe fitter by trade. I have worked in everything from Anheuser-Busch breweries, biopharmaceutical, and also a fair amount of power generation over the duration of my career. As running these organizations, now it's different. I'm not installing pipe anymore, but I am on a lot of the ground level in the early conversations that end up developing into projects. So, one of the most recent ones is the announcement of Micron Technologies building in Central New York. And, I will say from a selfish standpoint, we already do have a 20-year agreement with Micron to build that campus with the building trades workers. But what that's going to do is that investment of private equity is just the tip of the iceberg, and that further illustrates the need for more clean, reliable power. And so as that campus is going to be coming on, of course, the nuclear operators have already applied for a permit for a new reactor in Oswego County. Oswego County is a community that has raised their hand time and time again over the decades that is willing to host nuclear. Our workers are very safe at those facilities primarily because of the regulation and all of the oversight in the industry that ensures redundancy. There's a lot of safety features. There's a lot of second and third party validation with the processes and tremendous amounts of oversight. And it takes a little longer sometimes to do some of the work in these plants, but the injury rate is very low compared to commercial construction and everything else. We haven't had members that have ever gotten sick or any of that from exposure limits of even working in the facilities, and so many of them we live in the community that's actually in the shadow of that, and we hunt, fish, and everything right there. And so, I'm here to say that, we're very safe in our industry from that. A lot of our workers would prefer to work on a job site or in an industry that is that concerned about safety, well-being, and the environment. And so, hear me out. Tonight we're here to talk about the development of nuclear. Leading up to this, and if you've read any of the literature, the state has been tasked. There's been a blueprint and framework put in place, and we're gauging communities throughout New York State that are willing to host a reactor, newer technology. And, the mission has always been from the state that they do not want to put a plant where people don't want it. You've already heard that once. You'll hear it a few times over the next few months. But building a nuclear reactor, that provides us an opportunity to work in our community with a wage that sustains a family, which is becoming harder and harder. Each and every one of us, many of us, both mom and dad have to work and all of that to pay the bills. We understand that. We're in that same cycle with everybody else. But the opportunity for local workforce to build a plant in the community that they live in, it gives another level of ownership and engagement and caring. It's not like a workforce would come from out of the area, another state, just bomb something in, put it together half-assed. I know that's a technical term, but not care as much about it because they don't live in the community. It's going to be a local workforce with the existing workforce here, and it's going to have transitional opportunities for workers that were displaced from the fossil industry, and it also has a career path that's sustainable with a future for newer entrants into the construction industry. The nuclear mechanic average age is 58 years old, and a lot of it is because the regulations, the stringent policies, protocols, rules, and everything that it takes to get qualified to go into the plant. But without building the reactors, without having robust economic factors, the construction industry has not been working in that space to the scale that they need to. The plants are all fine, they're all maintained, they all run great, they're very reliable. They're up into the 90s, high 90s as far as running continuously in between, so they're very dependable. But what that could bring with the new fleet of reactors or single reactors that are coming is new career paths. You know, a lot of students, we have a lot of members that actually have degrees that are unrelated to construction technology because they've went and earned a degree in a field that really doesn't have a lot of opportunity, or they're in a field, came from a field that it's not as sexy as it used to be. Law enforcement and educators have been leaving their workplaces, coming into the spaces there where they can actually provide for their family. So my standpoint is a non-scientific, non-technical, but what it is, it's the local component of the benefits economically of hosting a facility or a reactor. And if you have any children anywhere else in your family that is still unsure, there's a lot of things that need to be built. We are an industry that it's a tough one. We're going to ask a lot out of you. You work outside in the cold when it's cold. You work in the heat when it's hot out, and all that. It's a different career path. But one of these facilities in our own community provides, it'll be 1,000 workers for 5 to 6 years just building it. And then we'll be back to maintain it and everything else. And these are 6-figure jobs, in case you want to know. I mean, that's real. And that's why I'm here on this panel, because not only do we work in the industry today, we also will work in the industry tomorrow, and we have the highest level of confidence, and we are in great hands. That's all I have tonight. I will be here later, but thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg. Let me just make sure we got the right slides. That's yours, right, Keith? All right, next up we have Keith Schue. Keith is an electrical engineer by trade, having received his master's degree in electrical engineering from the University of Virginia. He worked in hardware design and development for over a decade. As a dedicated conservationist, he later spent several years with the Nature Conservancy in Florida, working on the impact of human development and infrastructure on ecosystems, habitat fragmentation, and large landscape conservation. Applying his knowledge and experience as an electrical engineer, he currently reviews and comments on energy policy right here in New York. Keith?
Yeah, thank you, everybody, and thank you for that kind introduction, Eric. I really appreciate it. And I'm not going to repeat what Nuclear New York is because Eric told you that too. So I think we all want the same thing. That's where I'm going to go here. How do I do it? Up? Down? There we go. Okay, yeah. So I think we all want the same thing, really. We all want clean air. We all want clean water. We want to protect the environment. And when I say we want to protect the environment, I'm not just talking about the 1 or 2 degree rise in temperature. I want to protect the environment. I want to protect nature. I want to protect habitat, wildlife. Those kind of things are important to me as an ecologist. But we all want reliable energy, I think. We want a vibrant economy, good jobs making things that are here in America, an energy system that's secure, and a nation that's secure. And we're going to talk about each of those things as it relates to nuclear power tonight. You know, this is, there we go, okay. So We call this Nuclear 101. So just very, very briefly, what is a nuclear power plant? Well, it's basically a fossil fuel power plant without the fossil fuels. And what do I mean when I say that? Well, you have a source of heat, right? And that source of heat runs a steam turbine, and that steam turbine produces electricity. Fossil fuel power plant operates that way too, except with a fossil fuel power plant, you're burning something. You're burning things that create pollution, puts carbon into the air, intensifies climate change. And it adds things like SOx and NOx and the particulate matter, black carbon. If it's a coal plant, you got to worry about things like mercury as well. With a nuclear power plant, you don't do that. You create heat, but you create heat with fission. And the leftover products, we don't put that up in the air. We save it. We store it safely away. So we'll talk about that. These are the nuclear power plants that we got here in New York. They're wonderful facilities. They've been operating for decades. They still have good life in them. And I think you're going to see the licenses for these things renewed, which is a positive thing. It means it's going to help us meet our energy needs. But what we're here to talk about tonight really is this stuff, right? The new stuff. This is the new advanced nuclear technologies. The experts here are going to tell you about what each of those things, what all these things are, a whole plethora of them. And they come in different sizes too. You know, you have large reactors, you have small modular reactors. That's where you have the piece parts that come in, large parts that come in on trucks, and then they're modularized, so you put it together on the site. And then you have microreactors where maybe the whole reactor comes in on a truck. So there's lots of possibilities here. Like Tom said, we need reliable energy. I'm going to tell you why I like nuclear as an engineer, but also as an environmentalist. As an engineer, we need it. Reliable energy. A lot of our energy is baseload electricity demand that's there all the time. So if you have something that can give you electricity all the time, then you're better off. Wind and solar have low capacity factors. It means you don't get the same amount of energy over time for the same megawatts of power. Nuclear, on the other hand, has a very high capacity factor. And the other thing you run into when you're relying so much on intermittent sources like wind and solar is that you're not getting electricity when you need it. So you need storage, okay, to give it to you when you actually need the electricity. These things, these issues start to add up. And as you progress and add more intermittent solar and wind into the grid, it becomes more costly, more difficult to add the support infrastructure, the storage, the transmission, the stabilizing equipment, and so forth to make it work. That's the reality. So having reliable, always-on energy is a really good thing. And we need abundant energy, okay? Micron, that was already talked about, that could use as much power as the combined electricity demand of New Hampshire and Vermont today. It's really phenomenal how much energy we're going to be needing in the near future. And when you have the ability to produce abundant energy with nuclear power, you can do other really great things too. You can use not just making electricity, but you can use the heat as process heat for industries. You can combine electricity with heat to do things like hydrogen production, seawater desalinization, synthetic fuel production. District heating is also even a possibility with nuclear. Something a lot of people don't realize is that nuclear power right now is saving people's lives. The reason I say that is because there are isotopes that are being bred within reactors, and CANDU reactors in Canada actually are doing this right now. Isotopes that are helping to treat people and to save lives. So that's why we need it. Now, as an environmentalist, I'm going to tell you why I love nuclear power. Life cycle greenhouse gas emissions. We already said it doesn't produce any combustion emissions. We know that already about nuclear. But when you look at life cycle, you got to still build stuff. You got to build solar panels and wind turbines and so forth. When you look at the total emissions associated with the whole industry, nuclear actually has the lowest life cycle greenhouse gas emissions. How about land? Well, we know that this stuff takes up a lot of land. Okay, some of this is self-explanatory. But by far, nuclear has the smallest physical footprint of any energy source. So another aspect of things is that the things you have to extract out of the ground. A lot of times folks will tell you, well, the wind is free, the sun is free. They're not extractive resources. They're actually pretty extractive resources because you got to build them, and that requires steel, cement, aluminum, copper, all the stuff that you see listed here. When you do an objective side-by-side comparison, nuclear actually has the smallest material intensity of any energy source. Okay, so somebody's going to ask, well, what about the uranium? You're not thinking about the fuel. Why aren't you talking about the fuel in this? Let's add fuel to this equation, okay? We add fuel to the equation. We're going to add another color, a red color, onto this. Yeah, that swaps everything out. Oil and gas uses a lot of fuel. That changes the numbers and the scale of everything here. Nuclear has a red bar representing fuel too, but it's so small you can't see it. That's one of the amazing things about nuclear power is it's extremely energy dense. You just need a tiny little bit of it to make a whole lot of energy. One uranium pellet, about the size of a gummy bear, has as much energy in it as a ton of coal. That's pretty amazing. And when you have a small volume going in, you have a small volume going out in terms of waste. And I think we're going to talk about this more, but we store that waste. We don't put it up into the atmosphere, and we can even recycle it. So, Carl's going to, his company Exodus, he can tell you more about that. So there are a lot of great things about this technology, we believe. Bottom line is, when you add all this up, high energy density, small land and material use, very little waste, that adds up to conservation. And to me, as an ecologist, that's pretty darn important. And I got to tell you, too, that in Congress, there's bipartisan support for nuclear power. It's pretty amazing, actually. The ADVANCE Act was passed under the Biden administration. And that was an initiative to triple nuclear capacity in this country, and also with other countries that were partners to that agreement, too. This guy here, remember John Kerry? In his past, he was extremely anti-nuclear. He was protesting these things. Ask him today, he says we need it, and he's right. You know, I think we can all learn, and this guy is an example of that. How about today? What's going on today? We have a president who is actually upping the ante even further. Instead of just tripling nuclear capacity, we're talking about quadrupling nuclear capacity, and doing things to make the industry work more effectively. That's what we're seeing here. Chris Wright, I'm going to read this short quote, as global energy demand continues to grow, the department will work diligently and creatively to enable the rapid development, deployment, and export of next generation nuclear technology. Why do I emphasize that word export? Well, this is the situation. I think in the past you could say that the superpower that wins is a superpower that has the most nuclear weapons stationed around the world. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think now the superpower that wins is a superpower that has the most nuclear reactors of its own stationed around the world. And I'm telling you, Russia and China are trying to do that right now. They're building reactors, they want to install them in other countries, and that's not really good for our national security. Because when you do that, you're building a long-term, 100-year relationship with that country. We can't afford to not be players in that. This is something we need to engage in. So, you know, I'm right near the end here, but basically, there's so much going on. I can't begin to talk to you about all these here, but we'll talk about a lot of the activities that are happening around the country. You know, here's an example of, you know, a set of some of the things that are happening. Pretty amazing stuff. And like Eric pointed out, New York Power Authority is now in the game too. So that's basically all I had to say. Thank you very much.
Slides. Just want to make sure we have the right one next. Okay. All right, next up we have Isuru. Isuru Seneviratne is a finance professional with 2 decades of experience in energy investment. He now works as a director with the multidisciplinary team at Lucid Catalyst consulting firm to solve energy and climate challenges at scale and speed using reliable and affordable energy systems. He also has a master's degree in sustainability from Harvard Extension School. Isuru?
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. Everybody has to, the learning process here. So, nuclear economics. So, I think as we learned yesterday, and as in general we know, energy costs are a pocketbook issue now. Elections are being won and lost based on energy costs. So there's a persistent concern that nuclear is a very expensive technology, so I'm here to kind of address what does that mean. So, so there's electricity generation assets. So we know that solar and wind costs have been coming down, and that's on a generation asset level. And that's great. We need low-cost solar and wind. We need low-cost other energy sources. So the plant-level production costs are coming down for solar and wind, but that's not the cost that you pay on your electricity bill. Your electricity bill, at least half of it is in transmission and distribution. So transmission, those are the grid-level costs. And I think Tom mentioned the kind of inverter-based generation technologies needing the inverter on top of the generation asset, right? So similarly, if you add storage, if you add backup generation, and if you add demand response, so when the demand is high, you say to industry, say, hey, don't use electricity because we are short. So there's an economic cost to that. So that goes in the kind of grid level cost of system. And then the socio-environmental costs, which Keith talked about, the land use, the material intensity, the mining, all that stuff, those are system level costs. So I'm not saying one is better than the other, but we need to think of these things on a holistic basis as opposed to just narrowing on one thing and saying this is expensive. So do nuclear power plants cost more? Well, yes and no. In the US, you can see in the 80s and 90s, the costs kept going up, and then we stopped building them. 30 years later, we built one Plant Vogtle in Georgia at $15 a watt. So that's pretty expensive. Whereas we see in China, the more you learn, the more you deploy, the costs actually have been coming down. And we've seen that in other places as well. In South Korea, in France, when they did their expansion program, in the UAE, which just finished their first nuclear power plant build, programmatic deployment of the same reactor type has shown the ability to bring the cost down materially. So I think we, even if we don't get to China levels at $5 a watt or something like that, that's a pretty good deal when you think about the system level costs of electricity. So this is the kind of pathway to low cost nuclear. So this is, a lot of my work in my day-to-day job is trying to figure out and educate people on how to go from the first of a kind, expensive nuclear to the non-first of a kind, second of a kind nuclear. That's Plant Vogtle, that's the Georgia plant that we built. Second of a kind, and if you think about that, right? Like we trained 30,000 people to build the first next generation nuclear plant in Georgia. 30,000 people who had to work, communicate with each other, organizational structure, you had to train how to do all this stuff. We had a regulator who hadn't licensed this technology, and we had a supply chain that was dormant for 30 years. So now that we've built Plant Vogtle, we actually have all these things. We have the workforce, though many of them have dispersed because we haven't then moved on to build the next one using the same workforce. So we'll have a little more hiccup there. But the design is finalized. We have the fully digital blueprints. So if you build a reactor today, according to MIT, it'll be around that $10 per watt level. And as you build more of the same kind, you can come down the cost curve to the kind of $5 per watt kind of level. So that's the program build thing. So that's, if you look at what China has done, and look at the chart before, and the Baraka plant in the UAE, you build, deploy of the same reactor. You don't have to redo all the engineering. You don't have to retrain all the workforce. The US has 100 megawatts of 100 gigawatts of nuclear capacity. There's only about 2 or 3 of those reactors of the same kind. We have every single other one is a bespoke, one-off build. So it makes sense that it's expensive. So that's the program build, skilled workforce, optimized sequencing, supply chain, ramp up, all that stuff. But the work that I'm doing for the most part is trying to go even from the program build down to the productization of nuclear. So if you think about everything, the chair, the water bottle, the shoes, these are all kind of not bespoke, one-off, handcrafted, artisan things. These are kind of manufactured in a factory setting. You are kind of away from the weather delays and people getting sick and all that stuff. You create an environment where learning is ingrained into your process. So that's coming. There are reactor companies that are building, that are saying, look, the traditional approach has been to design the reactor and then figure out where the supply chain, where the components come from. But now some companies are saying, look, the process of designing the reactor and the process of designing the factory that makes the reactor is one and the same. It's a kind of Tesla gigafactory type concept where the product is the factory and the output of that is the consumption, the thing that you consume. So anyway, more to come. So what are the kind of actions for commercial liftoff for nuclear in New York? This is a concept that Nuclear New York is working on. So programmatic deployment, commit to 5 to 10 standardized reactors by 2040. So each community, there are many reactor choices, and we're going to hear about some of them. But if you say, hey, Messina is going to do this, and Buffalo is going to do that, and somebody else is going to do that, you're not going to get the learning curve. So we need some way to communicate and work through and get people to agree on, okay, this is the design that we want to work on. And then down select to 1 to 2 designs, as opposed to worldwide, there's 100 reactor designs being worked on today. So that's a lot. And that brings you the cost reductions, multi-unit builds on the same site. That's a huge cost reduction as well, because you have the shared water, shared infrastructure, shared workforce facilities, training facilities, all that stuff. Capitalize on existing infrastructure. We have a lot of, the grid, I kind of joke about this, but I think this is true. I think adding high-level transmission infrastructure, high voltage transmission, is probably an order of magnitude harder than adding a nuclear plant to the grid. Because a transmission line goes through somebody's backyard, doesn't create any jobs, doesn't create any, it's just a disturbance of the energy sprawl that Keith is so concerned about. So let's maximize on the transmission infrastructure so that we can upgrade the same transmission lines with the higher capacity factor transmission, add a nuke so that we can power the data center or the factory down the street or down the transmission line. Brownfield sites, we have a lot of fossil, industrial, military, or other nuclear sites where we can add more nuclear plants. We can work on barge-based delivery, where you kind of get away from this site-based infrastructure, mega project morass, but then build it in a shipyard, ship it to you. And there's a huge amount of federal support, both from the Biden-Harris administration and from the Trump-Vance administration. The support for nuclear is off the hook. So the federal government is saying they just committed $80 billion of funding from the Loan Programs Office to build large nuclear plants. So that adds up to about 10 reactors for the country. It behooves New York to lobby for and get 2 to 3 of these reactors, beat the Californians to the dust. And so the investment tax credits that I talked about, investment production tax credit, they are 30 to 50% of the capital investment that you put in, you get back as a tax credit. So effectively, as Julie Kosaraki from the DOE Loan Programs Office says, it's buy one, get one free. That's it. So Eric, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Isuru. All right. Next, we have Youssef. Youssef Ballout is the CEO of Kadmos, a recently launched small modular reactor nuclear company. Having received his PhD in engineering from Wichita State University in Kansas, Youssef has spent decades leading the advancement of U.S. reactor programs and design, testing, and deployment. His career spans teaching at the Virginia Military Institute, a 26-year tenure with the U.S. Naval Reactor Program supporting submarine, carrier, and spacecraft reactor design, as well as senior leadership at the Idaho National Labs, where he served as director of their Reactor Systems Design and Analysis Division, overseeing next-gen test reactor initiatives. Youssef?
Thank you all for being here, and please give a hand to Assemblyman Scott Gray for making this possible. So I actually spent a lot of years, almost 36 years in nuclear technology. A lot of gray hair now in the last few years because of what's going on in the nuclear industry at large, that there is a lot of demand on more energy. And the best way to deliver more energy is to deliver it through something what we call in the industry of energy, energy-dense materials. And that happens to be nuclear technology through uranium. So you see, this picture has a meaning. There's lights everywhere. That's the point of this picture. Oh. I'm taller than Isuru, that's why. And so nuclear technology is one of the best answers to keep this going. Not the only answer, but the best. So I'm just going to tell you what a small reactor is. You see this thing here, it's use this prop all the time. A small modular reactor could be something like this. Why do I tell you this? Because most of you, sometimes over the years, you're driving in the United States and you saw this huge cooling tower next to a nuclear power plant. The acreage that this nuclear power plant sits on is about 1,000 acres. This thing here, let's say this is the reactor. Roughly, this is about 33 feet high and about maybe 15 feet in diameter. You put it in the ground, actually, it goes in the ground in a hole that we dug. You line it up with steel and concrete, and you drop the reactor in it. So now it has no way, simply no way, to contact the environment outside where the reactor is sitting. That's one thing. Two, it's in ground. If something went wrong, it's not going to go far because it is in ground. So it's a huge, huge difference between this and the huge reactors that you see while you're driving on the road. It's not for aesthetic reasons, it's for practical reasons, like I just told you. You see that red truck? That's actually a simulation of my granddaughter's toy. The point of it, if you look inside it, there's no laser on this, or maybe there is. Nope. Well, there is, but you don't see it. So those are the huge tower I talked about. And the reactor I'm talking about to the right, that's the tiny reactor. So compare the two. You see huge facilities needed to operate the big reactors. There's one more big difference. That reactor sitting to the left, my left, is the same thing I showed you about here, will be assembled in a facility, made, pulled together in a facility, and the pieces. It's like Legos. A lot of us here, I look at a lot of the people, you played with Legos, come on, I admit to it. The same thing. You take the pieces, that's why it's called modular. Those modules, you take them, you assemble them, on site, you drop it in the ground like the reactor I'm talking about. Those things, it's built in place. That takes years. The most expensive thing about a nuclear reactor of the traditional reactors is actually the concrete, nothing else. It takes a lot of years and the time it takes to build it. And so you have a lot of questions. I decided to tell you about them in here. But before I tell you about them in here, I want to tell you also where I came from. This just until last month, my last job, the Idaho National Laboratory, whereas I was actually the director of the reactor systems design and analysis. So no one here has ever seen, and I'm confident in what I'm telling you, the construction of a reactor. I have. The reactors that we're building at the Idaho National Laboratory today, they're unique in the nation. We have three. We call them, I'll just tell you the name without the meaning of the name, but because it's not important. Marvel, McCree, and Pele. Pele is for the Department of Defense. McCree is one of the American companies that is trying to develop a new type of reactor, and Marvel is for the Department of Energy. We're building it to learn how to build, again, nuclear reactor. So what's up? Like 6,000 people work at the lab. What the hell are you saying? They're going to learn? Because the last time we built a reactor in the lab was 1974. That's 51 years ago. And so even engineers, we need to relearn our craft. So when we say we're going to build something, put it in this community, we've done a lot of testing. You probably don't know that, but we built 52 reactors in the lab until 74. We stopped. One of them, the borax, we blew it up. We blew a reactor up. We can't do it today anymore, but the reason we did it to see, as engineers, what would happen. We did it. So if you have any questions about how do you know this, ask me in the next phase. Then you look at the bottom. On the left, this is the advanced test reactor. I used to sit there and stand there and look down into it, and you see that blue color. That's also called Cherenkov radiation. Those of you who studied physics know that the fastest thing in the air is light. Well, or particles that move similar to light, photons. Is blue because of what we call Cherenkov radiation, because the particles coming out as they break from the water into the air, they actually give that blue hue, so it looks blue to the eye. So Carl saw it recently, I think. And then there is another experiment that actually was done at NASA, the Krusty reactor. It was a microreactor, it's not even an SMR. I'm showing you this to let you know there is a lot of experience in the nuclear community building these reactors. And the last one is the Transit Reactor Test Facility. I also have been in it, I don't know how many times. I've been on top of it and so on. That thing, the Transient Test Reactor, we call it treat, by the way. And he doesn't like it when we call him treat. And this reactor produces energy hotter than the sun when we test it. Because we put fuel in it, we want to see what happens to the fuel. It's actually higher than the temperature in the sun. So why the heck do we do this? To know what would happen in the reactor if something went out of spec. One more thing. You see that? You'll notice, by the way, I don't read what's on the screen. That is for you to read. For me, it's just to tell you the story. At the bottom on the right, I actually participated in 2002. That's why I went to Idaho. I went to Idaho to actually work on this thing, the packing that we put submarine nuclear fuel and carriers nuclear fuel in it and move it across the country safely, and then also store it safely until we have a national repository, and we don't have it yet. So that's what this is. And the rest is actually to show you other facilities that handles fuel, but also my other one, the first one, that's actually typically what you see. We call that an assembly inside a traditional pressurized water reactor. That's what mostly we have in the country. But also I want to tell you one more thing, because West Valley suffered from this sometimes in the past. Tritium. So tritium is, so we have hydrogen, has 1 proton. We have deuterium, which is really hydrogen with 1 proton, 1 neutron. And then, of course, the one we're talking about, tritium, it's the same thing. It's 1 hydrogen and 2 neutrons. Why do I tell you this? Because the body doesn't know the difference between H2O or TO. TO is tritium. It doesn't know the difference. So we drink it, we absorb it, and all of that. But it's the level of toxicity of it is really very low. It's very, very low, but still, we protect ourselves, our families, and the rest of the community from it too. And if you're worried about radiation, if my colleagues here would allow me, we don't have bananas here because I'm gonna get hungry. You all eat radiation. Every time you eat a banana. The banana has something we call K40 in it, or potassium isotope 40. It has it. Very, very low level. It's actually just about the same thing as what you see in a tritium condition. So most of us are not that educated about this, but I'm actually telling you, we eat it, and if we live without, we try to live without the radiation that we receive from the space, we call it cosmic radiation, we wouldn't exist. It's part of our living conditions. But every reactor we build, and part of that team, I think about myself, my family, and everybody I know. That's why the reactors we build are very safe. Most important part of it, SMRs, you put it in the ground, it is lined with no way for the water to leak. There will be no contact between the reactor and the water in the community. You don't need to put it next to a river. You don't need to put it next to a body of water. It is cooled from how we designed it. And if something went wrong, you have this system that contains it. And it's usually under a berm also, which I didn't tell you about. So it's here, and then we build a berm over it. Most of us, that's how we design it. So if you see a picture of an SMR that has a fancy building around it and so on, that's baloney. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be really covered in one way or another. Am I good? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Youssef. All right, last but not least, we have Carl Perez. Carl is the co-founder and CEO of Exodus Energy, a nuclear fuel recycling company working alongside U.S. Navy nuclear system designers and recycling operators from Le Hague in France. A native New Yorker, Carl began his nuclear adventure in his last year of undergrad at Babson College. He now advises several nuclear initiatives within industry and government, such as Nuclear Energy Institute's Recycling Task Force, and he co-authored the latest molten salt reactor and thorium fuel cycle textbook, given his 8 years' experience developing molten salt reactors. Carl?
So thank you all again for being here and really making this event, because frankly, we're here for you. So we want to make sure that every single one of your questions are answered, just like yesterday at Jefferson County. So Sometimes I even come to these events to ask questions. I don't necessarily get the response that I wanted. So we'll be here all night if need be to make sure that everything is properly answered. And I think there's one topic that you definitely want to hear about, which is nuclear waste. The first thing I want to do is just point out two things. I'm one of the co-founders because, as Eric was mentioning, we actually brought talent from France where they recycle all of their spent fuel. And so they don't have any mines in France, so they need to recycle that material to be able to put it in their reactors. They also don't have any dry storage, which is something that we have here in the United States. The second thing I really want to point out is we say recycling nuclear waste to fuel the future. But the reason why this RFI is in place is because we may not necessarily all agree on how the industry has behaved in the past. I don't think anyone really opposes nuclear technology itself because, well, first of all, the sun is a fusion reactor. So even when we use solar, we're basically using a fusion reactor that's heating solar panels. The second thing is we actually had a natural nuclear reactor in Gabon, underground, just because you had a uranium mine, and because of the geothermal power, you basically had a natural reactor. So I think a lot of the opposition comes from the nuclear industry. And frankly, I definitely feel you on that. Because I was formerly anti-nuclear. And when I talk about the future and the RFI process that's currently available, it's to make sure that you have a say in the future of nuclear that we can build together without necessarily agreeing on what has been done in the past. And one thing that I'm particularly passionate about is mining and avoiding it if we need to. And so what you see here is a picture of, is this the pointer? Opa. Okay. Sorry? This one? Yeah. This is the pointer? Oh, this pointer is... Well, but that soccer field is actually right hidden behind the building of that natural gas plant. So when we think of New York City, we always think of those tall skyscrapers. Well, I grew up in affordable housing right there. And my soccer field was right there. And so basically, you had that natural gas plant not just emitting tritium in the water, but lead, polonium, radium, which is the stuff that actually killed Marie Curie. And that's not at all accounted for. And so when law was actually enacted to ban tritium discharge in the Hudson River from Indian Point, interestingly enough, the original bill proposed radioactive discharges and banning that. But if you were to ban that, every single facility, and not just energy plants in New York, would not be able to discharge, and they're vehemently opposed to that. So they wanted to single out nuclear with tritium. When I would come back from practice every Tuesday and Thursday, I would smell the sulfur in the water there. And so I was actually anti-nuclear, and my father protested against the construction of nuclear power plants in France in the 70s, but we realized that there was a much bigger problem for us, and that was natural gas plants. And so when I decided to get involved in the nuclear space, I wanted to single-handedly tackle one of the biggest issues that I had with it, which is the waste. And before I start going into detail of how we're going to tackle that, you could actually stand on top of an operating reactor, as Youssef was mentioning. And I wanted to show a couple of pictures, but I couldn't get it cleared for today, but I'm glad to show as many of you as possible. I have it on my phone. I actually stood on top of a 1,500 megawatt BWR. And did 9-hour shifts for an entire week at one of our clients' plants to actually recycle their spent fuel and see how they put it in cask and what's bolted versus what's welded. My total dose from the week was 0.6 millirem. So I don't know if that speaks to many of you. It didn't speak to me before. But out of curiosity, we kept our dosimeters when we got on our flight from Atlanta to New York. And the dose was 7 millirem, which means that we got more than 10 times the dose from a 2-hour flight from cosmic radiation than from an entire week in a nuclear power plant right on top of the waste. Literally putting our hands on top of the containers that were used to put it in and store it. Wild. And just before, okay, looks like that's, oh, there we go. That's all the spent fuel in those pools. And it's really important to understand that every single bit of waste is monitored, to the protective clothing, to the mask, to the helmet. I wanted to keep a hard hat when I came out of the plant, and they told me no, we're keeping that. So just to give you an example of how rigorous it is, So I was talking about the waste that went into the river from the natural gas plant. Where do you think the rest of the waste goes? My lungs. All right? When you inhale the carbon emissions, it goes to your lungs. You know, no one's accounting for that. So if we have any consultants, make sure that you wear a dosimeter so you can go complain. Now, when we talk about waste, what exactly are we talking about? Because we were actually looking at building a sodium fast reactor in Wyoming, and when I say we, it's the industry and specifically TerraPower. And it was supposed to be built on a former coal plant. As irony would have it, that plant is too radioactive, and so we need to decommission the coal site to be able to put a nuclear power plant because it's actually much less radioactive. Who would have believed that? At least I wouldn't have. So when we're talking about the waste, really what we're talking about is that 3% of total volume that accounts for 96% of the nuclear waste radioactivity. So when it comes to, the low-level waste, that's basically equivalent to what you have from every single industrial site. Whether you're making shoes or whatever it is that you want to make, you're going to generate waste. There's no such thing. Intermediate level waste is actually a category that exists in Europe, but in the United States, we kind of loop that in just in the high-level waste. So we're a bit more cautious with that. Coal ash would be in that intermediate level waste category. But this is the type of stuff that really represents only 7% of the total volume of what it is that we're producing. If you were to take all the spent, all the nuclear, the spent nuclear fuel waste in the United States, it would actually fit in a Walmart, just to give you a sense of scale. So as a nuclear fuel recycling company, we literally have every incentive to say that it's dangerous and that we need to recycle it ASAP because, if anything happens to the waste that's stored on site, we'd have to do something. Well, I don't want to be dishonest. It really is safe. The cask that they put the spent fuel in gets hit by missiles, trains, the tests that they do are completely wild to be able to show that those can actually be certified, as Youssef was kind of alluding to. But we're really going to zoom in on that high-level waste because that's really what keeps everyone up at night. It's the stuff that's radioactive for over 10,000 years, at least, if not, 100,000 years for a couple of isotopes in there. So this is what nuclear fuel looks like. Now you may wonder, why do we have 96% actinides and 4% fission products? Because we typically only consume 4% to 5% of the uranium content in nuclear fuel. So you have 95% of the energy content that hasn't been used. And so if you were to reuse that material, you wouldn't have to mine a single gram of uranium from the ground for the next century with the current fleet of reactors that we have in the United States. If we were to use advanced technologies like the sodium fast reactors, molten salt reactors, like many other concepts being proposed, you would actually be able to fuel the fleet indefinitely. Really cementing the importance not just of recycling, but also making sure that we innovate. But when it comes to the actinides, that's really what we focus on. It's making sure that we can recycle that uranium that has an enormous monetary value. The other thing that you'll notice is in that 96%, there's plutonium and minor actinides. And in fact, if you mix that plutonium and minor actinides with some uranium, so roughly 3 to 4% of that total material, you actually have an alternative to 19% enriched nuclear fuel. And so this is actually the ideal fuel for advanced reactors. So consider that 96% usable. That 4%, much trickier to recycle. Admittedly, there's no perfect process. But as someone who's had his parents both survive cancer, 2 years ago at the same time, and seeing the treatment costs, those isotopes in the fission products, such as lutetium, such as molybdenum, technetium, are actually the isotopes that you use to be able to do chemotherapy. And so even in the waste of the waste, there is some residual value. It's a little hard to get it out. It's something that I cannot tell you for sure we'll be able to get at the right purity, again, out of pure technical honesty, but it's something that I'm wholly dedicated to. So when we think about the value of these liabilities, we always think about it as 90,000 tons spread across 78 different sites, and we actually discharge an additional 2,000 a year. So you may look at this as a liability, you may look at this as toxic waste, but the reality is it's actually $14.3 billion worth of uranium that we don't have to pull out of a mine. And there we go. And every year that's basically $316 million. These are the plants that we have in the state of New York. And so if you look at the total spent nuclear fuel as of 2021, that's 4,700 tons. That equates to roughly $700 million worth of uranium only. If you account for that uranium transuranic mixture with the minor actinides and plutonium, that number goes to 2.4 billion. So just imagine how much value we can bring to New York just by making sure that we don't keep it on site and actually put it to good use. And obviously you cannot substantiate these statements without the evidence. And so I'm just going to make sure that we spend as much time on answering your questions, so I'll just gloss over these, but please don't hesitate to come by and ask us about these. So thank you, and please don't look at waste as waste, it really is fuel.
All right. Let's see. Is this on? You can hear me?
Yep.
Yeah? All right. Now's the fun part. We'll have a little Q&A. We will try to answer as many questions as possible until 7:30, and again, we're going to stick around afterwards for a while, so come and talk to us. We like talking about this stuff. I'm going to start us off with one question apiece just to get us started. These are all trick questions, just as a warning. Just kidding. Okay, Tom, we have gotten a lot of questions about nuclear versus renewables. There's so many policy goals about expanding renewables, and now there's more of a shift towards nuclear. So should nuclear and renewables in decarbonization goals be seen as competitors or more complementary?
Yeah, that's a good question. We are evolving. I think we referred to that. I think some of us referred we need to pursue all of the above. And I think the correct answer is we are doing that. Nuclear is looking better today than 5 years ago, as the evidence shows. And there are reasons for that that we've been talking about. Land use is one. Capacity factor, 24/7 output of nuclear versus about 25% capacity for wind and solar is another. The economic data is there. That was an interesting chart you showed on the Chinese experience with reducing costs. But in the end, going forward, I think we're going to see all of those, and I think we're going to find the right use case for these as these technologies evolve. It will be a competition, and I think we all thrive with competition. And it's going to be exciting to see go forward. But nuclear is a strong opportunity that's definitely worth developing and progressing. And I think there is a future for it.
If anybody else wants to jump in also. Yeah, please.
Yeah,
I cannot believe that they've been pitted against each other. Especially living next to a natural gas plant, I cannot believe that we're putting the nuclear community, that are all environmentalists, against the renewable community, who is also a group of environmentalists. I think the fossil fuel lobbies have benefited from that, competition between two clean energies.
So an important fact about all of the advanced reactors, especially the SMRs that I'm aware of today, they all actually are designed to actually work with the renewables. And we call it in the design load following. That means it looks at what's going on with the wind, or looks at what's going on with solar, and then when they are not producing energy because it's night or because there's no wind, they kick in and they do what's necessary. So not only they work together, they actually complement each other in other ways too, because there are many ways how you can, when the nuclear reactor is active but it's not making electricity because the other two are doing it, they're producing heat that the industry or whatever you need to do with it in the local community. So yes, they work together.
I guess,
Yeah.
is this on? Yeah, I guess the one thing I would add to that is, I think what we find, And you see this in California, where they've tried to go a full bore with just renewables, and places in Germany like have also tried to do the same. You don't get there. You find yourself still dependent on fossil fuels for part of your energy system. So, I think renewables are definitely part of the mix, but nuclear has to be as well if we're actually going to decarbonize completely. So I don't think the choice is between nuclear and renewables. The choice is between nuclear and fossil fuels. If we don't have nuclear in the mix, we're going to keep burning fossil fuels.
All right, use what works.
Reactors, the ones in Plant Vogel that were just built, they were up to 9,000 construction workers for almost 15 years on that. The project, had some issues with it, with the technology, soil conditions, management, and all of that. But the large-scale reactors, a single unit would, be close to 6,000 to 7,000 hard hats for about a decade. The indirect jobs that our communities experience, like in Oswego County, there's over 3,000 indirect jobs, not counting the workforce that works directly for the plant. That's the direct workforce. Fabrication facilities, suppliers, all of the materials and goods needed to operate the plants, feeding the workforce and everything else all the way down through. We're talking thousands of additional jobs that support one single facility. And like I said earlier, it's a very good wage, it's a very safe environment, and it's a very regulated, controlled environment that not only has high safety factors for the employees and anybody that's on the site, but part of the reason why it has such an oversight and such a critical view on all of the job and work processes is so it is done exactly properly as it's designed, so the plant will see or exceed its useful life. And that is one of the reasons why, from the skilled trades gap, like critical path welding and all of that, for one weld to be made, before you're even welding on it, the fit up of the joint is inspected. And then after that passes inspection, then you go through the next process. So quite a bit of jobs, even if you're not working directly for the company that operates the plant.
If anybody else wants to jump in.
Let me just add to this, because some of the parts of the question ask about, okay, the non-nuclear engineers here, are they going to have jobs? You bet. Because if you step into a nuclear facility or a a field where we're building nuclear reactors, I'm really having trouble finding an engineering profession that wouldn't participate. But more importantly, actually, the non-engineers, technicians, they'll be part of the process. The welders, the pipe fitters, the plumbers, you can name all of them, they'll all be part of the process. Sorry, Greg, the most highly paid technical person working and other than an engineer are the welders. Welding is a very, very highly well-paid profession in our business, because welding for a nuclear is very, very specialized. So.
Interesting. All right, next one goes to Carl. We've had a lot of questions about different kinds of fuel. People are very excited about thorium reactors, but we use mostly uranium and also plutonium. Could you talk about the differences between these and where the industry's going?
Yeah, so in fact, I support using everything we possibly can that we don't have to pull out of the ground. So if we can use the thorium, if we can use the plutonium in the waste, as I mentioned, we wouldn't have to mine a single gram of uranium in the ground if we actually deployed advanced nuclears, really at scale, and nuclear reactors at scale, and was recycling at scale as well. Obviously, it's going to be hard to wean ourselves from mining, in the short term, even as we scale up. But when it comes to thorium, plutonium as different fuels from uranium, I was anti-nuclear, but once I started interacting with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, I loved it, because it was so robust. They make sure that whatever you do, you qualify it. And in fact, one of the reasons why, when I was working in the nuclear reactor sector, we did not pursue thorium fuels is because it would take roughly 15 years worth of qualification for a new fuel, because otherwise it's not going in a reactor. So I'm all for it. It's as a business, it's just really hard to justify, spending those resources for 15 years before you even put it in a product. Now, I will say that there are companies that are working on putting thorium in today's reactors, and they're working on qualification as we speak.
Next question to Youssef. A lot of questions are about safety regulations. Of course, everybody wants safety regulations, but there's the question of how much is too much, and certain authors like the book The Abundance by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson have talked about, is there such a thing as too much that prevents building clean technology? So how do you find that balance?
Thank you for the question. I think it's very important to the people outside the field that we're in. There's something called NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. What they do actually, their sole function is to look at any new design coming and any new reactor to be built. Not just design, it could be the same design, you're building it again. You go through the same story because maybe you put it in a different location. It may have different characteristics. So the NRC has very strict rules how you're going to actually be allowed to be licensed. They give you a license to build a reactor. Their entire function is to look at safety. People think from outside, well, they're really looking at the value of design, or will it be making money? None of that. The sole purpose of the existence of NRC is you, the public, to make sure that the regulations follow and the regulation makes sense and updated for new reactors. They're actually going through that now to make sure, because there are new reactors coming down the pipeline, they also follow these strict rules of safety. Now, let me tell you one more thing. You all heard of the 3 Mile Island events of May 1979. How many Americans died during that event? Does anybody know? 0. Correct. No one died. I just lied a little bit, not too much. I'm sorry?
Fukushima?
I'll get to that, and I'll tell you the story of Fukushima. Actually, one person died at the 3 Mile Island event. He was sitting in his living room watching the news, got panicked, and had a heart attack. But reactor direct involvement, nothing. Thank you for asking about Fukushima. So Fukushima, nearly 19,000 souls were lost. Almost 19,000 people were killed. That's, yes, a lot of loss of life. But the deeper question would be asked also, so how many of them died because of radiation? None. They drowned. People drowned in Fukushima. That's what's missing from the story. Don't worry about movies. Worry about facts. My team, well, actually, I'm telling you, you don't know this, but I'm going to tell you something. People who worked for me and with me at the Naval Reactor Facility were on one of the U.S. carriers, monitoring the events, going into the field, advising the Japanese government what to do relative to radiation. No one died because of radiation. Movie or not, no one. It's not my opinion. Yes.
If I may add as well.
We'll have some time afterwards for one-on-one debate.
We should talk after.
And we can definitely talk.
I assure you, no one died because of radiation, no one.
But I will tell you that for sure there was a major radiation exposure issue that needed to be contained immediately. There's no doubt about that.
That's why we were there, to monitor the situation. But how many people died because of radiation? No one.
But there's definitely $100 billion worth of damages. You know, you have several thousands of people that evacuated.
I'll add to your knowledge also. I was at the Japanese Diet, their version of Congress, and I actually talked about those events right there in Japan. So, sorry.
And the other thing is, you know, my co-founder actually was at Fukushima on March 12 to basically build a decontamination facility to make sure that there was going to be no irreversible damage to Fukushima, because you can still go visit and not necessarily wear a hazmat suit on the site, because in fact a lot of the radiation was contained. Within 3 months, in record time, they were able to build that cesium and tritium decontamination facility. And it was a colossal effort. It was a significant amount of resources. And this is the type of thing that we do not want to see ever happen ever again. And that's the reason why there's roughly $40 billion worth of investment that had to come afterwards at every single plant in the world to make sure that this would not be able to happen. It was a colossal failure, there's no doubt about that. But we definitely want to make sure that we share the right information as well. In fact, that was one of the reasons why I was anti-nuclear. But upon learning about it, that's when I started realizing that not everyone was getting the right information. And that's why we're here.
Yeah, if I could add something too. There have been objective studies that have been done on all industries, all the energy sectors, and on a per terawatt hour basis. It's an awful statistic to talk about is deaths per terawatt hour. But when you do that objective comparison, you find that nuclear, even when you include things like Chernobyl, which arguably I would say you don't have to include because we don't build reactors that way over here. But even if you include that, objectively comparing different forms of energy, what you find is that nuclear's safety record, deaths per terawatt hour is about the same as renewables and far, 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 far safer than fossil fuels. You know, there's a saying that, you know, and I agree with it, the most dangerous reactor is the one you don't build. Because if you decide not to build a nuclear reactor, you're going to be burning fossil fuels. And that is going to be killing people. That is going to be altering our climate and putting pollution into the lungs of people.
These are obviously really important issues, so we appreciate you bringing up all of these, and we don't want to shy away from any of it. And long-term risk assessment is tough, and it's a multi-factor process, so we need to consider everything. All right, next question is for Isuru. You went over in your presentation different countries' experience, and it seems like in the 1970s and 80s there was a very big buildup of nuclear in France and South Korea. Now China is clearly the leader in building more nuclear, but the US was in the 1950s, 60s, and early 70s. So what happened, and in a sense, could we apply the same lessons to other industries? Because that was sort of a golden era of American manufacturing in many ways.
If you look at if you look at the history of energy additions, if you look at the decades of fastest clean energy additions on a per person basis per country, hydro has had the largest like top hits around the world, where you added a ton of hydro on a short period of time. But outside of hydro, nuclear has the ability to add the largest amount of clean energy on a short time frame. The US in the post 3 Mile Island, this is I'm not from the nuclear industry, but this probably is a outsider's perspective on this. So take it for what it's worth. But the contention I would make is that the nuclear industry stopped being a nuclear power generation industry, but a nuclear safety industry in the 70s or so. The higher that they could create the perception of, oh, these are very dangerous, you just got to pay us more billions of dollars to make it even more safe. I think that has been the industry until very recently. And the incumbents are partially, or not partially, but maybe fully responsible for that. But that is changing because now upstarts are coming and saying, hey, you might not want to sell nuclear energy, but we do. So, and that dynamic is now forcing the incumbents also to, and also the demand growth and the kind of the change in the zeitgeist, the change in the paradigm. Now we are in an energy growth scenario. We are going to need all sorts of energy generation sources. So nuclear is off to the races, and whether the industry can kind of replicate what the solar and wind industry has done over the last 2 decades, yet to be seen, but hopefully it will.
Anybody else want to jump in?
I just want to say that's a very good point. Not only do we need to build nuclear plants, we need to develop the technology to build them here. You were talking about Micron plant, similar. We need to develop the technology to build those microchips here. We've lost that. We saw things go overseas, and I think we need to bring them back. The risk we have from having a huge percentage of our chip manufacturers in Taiwan, for example, is something I think we should not stick with, and that Micron plant will help out with a lot. And the same with nuclear industry. Do we want to build designs from, sorry, I got excited. Do we want to build designs from Europe, Asia, et cetera, or do we want to build designs that are done here and we have the expertise and own that expertise? And that's extremely important, I believe.
And if I could just take one moment, I don't work for Micron, and I will say this, even absent of Micron choosing New York State for their mega fab and their production, the energy need is still there because the goals aren't being met with the decarbonization by losing Indian Point and the other forms of energy, the renewables coming online. The need was still there. Now it's just the need is there, and there's a tangible reason why some of the need is there to keep moving forward. I just wanted to make everybody clear on that.
I think just following up on what both of you guys said, the U.S. is in a electric demand growth paradigm that we haven't seen since the 90s. So we are like so if you are thinking about building a large infrastructure project like a hydro plant or a nuclear plant, you want to see the demand growth going up for a steady for a long period of time so that you can make sure that you can pay back your capital that you invest in the project. So since pre-90s, we have not had that. So nobody has had the confidence to go and build a large project like a nuclear project. But now we do, and now it's kind of going, the reindustrialization, the data centers, and beneficial electrification. The demand for electricity is aggressively growing. So we need to figure out how to build that infrastructure.
If I may add to that, 10% of Americans are energy poor today, where even coal is too expensive. And there's a reason why every summer in Brooklyn and the Bronx you have running blackouts for two reasons. Actual access in the moment where we need it, and second of all, because it's too expensive. And some people have to choose between groceries and their electric bill. And so we really need to be able to put out more power, increase our supply, and make sure that everyone gets equal access to refrigeration, medical care, lights, what we're benefiting from right now.
Many states and countries have passed climate policies, climate laws in the last decade or two, and New York is one of them. In 2019, they passed the CLCPA in kind of an era when nuclear wasn't really focused on. It was more focused on renewables. So this is for Keith. How does nuclear fit in with the CLCPA goals?
I think it fits. And if you look at the language of the CLCPA, it says that we have to have 70% renewables by 2030, which we're not going to make that, by the way. But it also has a goal of 100% carbon-free electricity. So that allowance is that a fairly large chunk could be from other sources of electricity that are not what people would like to define as renewables, as wind, solars, and so forth, but things like nuclear power. So I think there is a consistency there. Now, whether 70-30 is the right balance, I don't, that's debatable. Interesting thing is if you look at the actual specific language of the Act, it says that by the year 2030, in the year 2030, you have to have 70% renewables, which we're not going to do. We're going to pass that, and then all bets are off. Then it's a goal of 100% renewables. I'm sorry, 100% carbon-free, and whatever the best way of getting there is.
Technology neutral.
Technology neutral.
Anybody else want to jump in? All right, we'll move on.
was going to say, they refer to it as zero firm power, the extra, in the gold book, it was indicated that we needed zero firm power without specifying what zero firm power we'd be using. And I think they really came to the conclusion that we needed nuclear, which is why we find ourselves in this position of having NYPA, come out and make that declaration, is because we really tried in New York to find all alternatives away from nuclear. And when we shut down Indian Point, New York City lost 60% of its clean electricity, and we had to build 2 new natural gas plants and upgrade another one. So that was supposed to be replaced by wind capacity, which I was for, and I was telling myself, okay, well, if we can at least do that, then okay, I'm frustrated we lose this nuclear power plant, but at least we're getting renewable power instead. That's not what happened. And out of the 9 different projects that were supposed to proceed to replace that capacity, we're still on the 5th in terms of permitting.
All right. So I'm going to ask some questions, and anybody can jump in, take a stab at it. So getting a lot of questions about the fact that nuclear power plants very obviously have zero emissions, no air pollution, but they're worried about water. And although not all reactors require bodies of water, most reactors in the US are water reactors on bodies of water. So what is the effect of a nuclear plant on water resources involving things like tritium release or impact on fish?
Let me address that. That's a very fair question, and I talked about the federal regulations from the NRC relative to where you can put a reactor. The very first thing that they do, the environmental impact study, on whether you can put a reactor there, and they look at potential earthquakes in that area or not. So that's for the large reactors where they have to sit near, if it is designed in that fashion, they put them next to the ocean or next to a body of water and so on. For the SMRs, it's a different story. For the SMRs, the regulations basically is still generally the same if you kind of put it directly next to a lake and then draw water from the lake. But they're not designed like that. The design basically isolates the reactor from any body of water. It's self-cooled by how it is designed. And some of these reactors actually don't use water at all. They use helium, actually, mostly. It's a gas, the one you put in the balloons, the same one, but at much higher purity to cool the reactor. So not all reactors are really designed in the same fashion, not in the same way. But also, the small reactors are designed that, like I said, it's really isolated from contact in the water. And so then there is very, very little possibility for it to get to the water line. The tritium, because of the line that I was just talking about, within the reactor. Reactors are natural, tritium is a natural product of radiation. Tritium doesn't exist in nature by itself. Deuterium does, the first one I talked about. The third one, tritium, that we don't want to see out in the community, is only born in a reactor. And again, like I said, that the NRC regulation makes it so that makes it very difficult for it to be going down into the water lines. But if it did, the reactor will actually be stopped, and a lot of regulations will come into place to figure out why and how to stop it and so on. And so that's the story on it. Yeah.
Anybody else? I'll move on. Okay, this next one I think is the coolest question that I've heard tonight. So if you come find us, maybe I'll give you a trophy or something. We keep talking about how electricity demand is spiking like never before. So this question is, what if you're wrong? What if energy demand collapses before a nuclear plant is completed due to energy conservation, economic decline, or different lifestyle choices, if we all live in caves or something?
We have seen that before.
Is this more from like a global perspective or specific to the United States? Because there's at least 1 billion people in the world that consume less electricity than your refrigerator at home. Can you believe that? So there is a real need to make sure that at least 1 billion people get an equal quality of life. And I think really what we're trying to say is, let's try to not dig out the entire earth to be able to make the power that we need to have a prosperous life. That's really what we want for everyone, peace and prosperity. We want to make sure that poverty is not a breeding ground for conflict in the world. And when you think about it, nuclear being the most material dense, the most land efficient, allows us to be able to get the most out of our Earth. And I was speaking earlier about avoiding mining. I mean, that's the whole purpose. We want to make sure that everyone, or at least as many people as possible, can have the life choice they want. Now, there are communities in the Amazon and others that don't want power, that want to live the way that they want. That's completely fine. And yesterday we were talking about, let's not build reactors, in the Adirondacks. Like, no. The whole purpose of doing nuclear is to avoid having, miles and miles and miles of silicon covering our land, or miles and miles of wind turbines, natural gas plants, everything that you could possibly imagine. So again, it's really not just to preserve our Earth, but really maximize prosperity around the world and in the United States.
And I'll add, we've been through well over a decade of improving energy efficiency. The poster child for that, of course, is LED lighting. That led to pretty much a flat profile with very little load growth over those years. We've pretty well run through that now, and I don't see any new technologies that will particularly cut our use of electricity coming out. We have, on the other hand, a lot of evidence that there's going to be growth in electric power, electric vehicles, electric heating in our homes and buildings, and as said, the microelectronics industries are all indicating growth. So there is no indication that the demand is going to go down. One of the slides I must have skipped over, didn't get in there. I showed you the slide where we only had a couple thousand extra megawatts right now and said people were losing sleep. The governor has announced 1,000 megawatts of new, two reactors, 1,000 megawatts. It sounds like a lot, 1,000, but on that curve, that won't move us that much. And so the scale of what we're looking at, 1,000 megawatts of nuclear will help a lot, but it's not the full solution. And we did, another indication of that was in June, the June heat wave this year. Real-time market prices spiked in New York dramatically. I showed you $50 a megawatt hour on a typical day like today. They went up to something like $2,500 here, and about 3 times that down in Long Island. And that's a pretty severe indication that we need not only to act to increase our supplies, but we need to act quickly. And what that solution is, I don't know, but it's not something we can wait and see what happens.
I want to reflect back on something that Carl said a moment ago and quantify it a little bit. You were referring to how much solar silicon that would be across the landscape. Indian Point, that was 2 reactors, 2 functional reactors. And if you look at trying to replace that power, that energy, I should say, with solar, you would need about 60,000 acres of land covered with solar panels. If you did it with wind, you'd need about 1,400 giant wind turbines, each 600 feet tall, to try to do that. And that is just looking at the energy that you'd be creating annually over the course of a year. To actually turn that energy into useful electricity, which is electricity when you need it, and we need our electricity usually most of the time. That's the baseload thing that we were talking about. You'd have to add then storage on top of that. And then you have to consider transmission costs. And then also, because they're not synchronous generators, you've got to do synchronous condensers or some other things to stabilize the grid. So we're talking about lots of stuff that are required if you were trying to do things without firm, reliable nuclear power. And the other thing that's been borne out in a lot of the studies that have happened is that, and NYSERDA has concluded this too, that even if you try to do as much as you possibly can with wind and solar and batteries, there's going to be times when batteries are depleted, and you're still going to have some firm backup from something else that we haven't thought about yet. So So I think the reality is that if we want to have a solution that actually substantially decarbonizes our grid, then firm baseload nuclear should be part of that. And I guess I would add, because of the land consumption issues that I was just talking about, even if somebody invented some magic battery that stored, infinite amount of energy, even if that were to happen, would that be a good selection to pick a very energy diffuse type of thing, as opposed to an energy dense type of solution? Because with the energy dense type of solution, you conserve land, you conserve nature. You don't get that with the others.
We'll say that, like, if you need, if you have a village, that needs power, you don't need to completely overkill and bring a nuclear reactor there for that small community. So you really need to use the strengths of each technology and what they can bring to really get a solution. And when you see the urbanization rates in all over the world, and how many more people are living in cities, nuclear is really important for those type of use cases, where you have a New York City where you have 10, 15 million packed in an urban area, and you don't necessarily have as much space.
All right. Next one is kind of a technical grid question. So although solar and wind require ultimately more transmission lines due to regional variation, can the load from a nuclear installation be put onto current transmission lines? Or will new ones need to be installed, or will they need to be upgraded? Can the current transmission system in upstate New York handle this, as well as all of the current hydro and utility scale renewables in the region?
So that the grid, not just in New York, but in the United States, tends to be old. And there's a reason for that, because we were the first station in the world to actually, and not far from here actually, to start using electricity. And then we taught the rest of the world how to do. Obviously, it started near Niagara Falls. That's where it all started from. The issue of can you put nuclear reactors near existing grid and use that? Absolutely, yes. But then you have to assess, not because it's coming from nuclear reactors, it's just coming from a source that's sending electrons. The source is irrelevant. Can the grid handle this? That's a question for the local engineers to look at and see, can it handle it or not? So it has nothing to do with nuclear. It has to do with where you are, how much energy you need. And so if a new industry pops up here that it doesn't exist here, it's very likely you may want to add to the grid. Or
add that in New York, we have, after decades of stagnation on the transmission grid, we are now adding transmission. We're doing the project right in our backyard that will increase the transfer capability of that right away by over 1,000 megawatts. There is the Champlain Hudson line going in under construction right now. There are at least 2 or 3 others, so we are addressing that. It is an issue, but it is needed, and I agree. It's the amount of power you got to move rather than the source of the power.
Right.
So, I mean, to answer the question directly, I think you remember when I spoke, I said, what is a nuclear power plant? It's basically a fossil fuel power plant without the fossil fuels. Well, that's really good in terms of trying to integrate it into the grid, because theoretically, you could just pull out your fossil fuel power plants and plug in a nuclear power plant in those same places. Now, with demand growth, with load growth, that's not completely true. But we're going to, and so there'll be more transmission and other things associated with that demand growth. But anyway, go ahead.
Today, relative to the point you just brought up and the question itself, the Idaho National Laboratory actually started something called coal to nuclear. It's a conversion of coal power plants to nuclear power plants. And as we speak, that has already started. An existing power plant, coal power plant in Kemmerer, Wyoming, was actually emptied of its coal anything, and it's been converted into a nuclear power plant to be owned by TerraPower, the company that is basically mostly led and financed by Bill Gates. So the process is already in place, and they're going to end up with more power than the coal power plant used to produce. So that means they probably will add to the grid capacity. So,
I'd add, the aging of the transmission grid is real, and New York in particular we are pretty old grid, but also that presents an opportunity because as these grid, they age out, it's time to redo these transmission infrastructure. But now we have better technology that can 2x or 3x the amount of electricity that goes through that. So as these transmission lines and towers and stuff get older and time to renew them, we have an opportunity to say, look, this thing is coming due to be redone in 5 years or 10 years. Let's plan ahead and make sure we 2x that or 3x that, and we build the demand and the supply on both sides so we can actually disturb little nature, but actually get the power to where it's needed.
Just a couple more questions here. We're going to end at 7:30. Getting a lot of questions about people who I think are supportive of nuclear but are worried, if you build a nuclear plant in a small town upstate, is all the electricity going to be dominated by an AI data center and maybe sent downstate by a transmission line? So do these worries have merit that whatever benefits should be for the local community will be spread elsewhere?
This is an opportunity. As a North Country, proud North Country, all you city people. Some of us love living up here, but we have our challenges. And this is an opportunity for us to benefit from the assets we have and improve our economy. And to me, that's a bright spot potentially for us, that we can do this and proudly export that power down to other places.
Well, that's it. Exactly. The host community that actually has the power generation, regardless of where you live or where the power is being generated, once it's put onto the grid, it does flow to where the need is, whether it's right here in town or whether it's hundreds or thousands of miles away to get to its use. The benefit of having the plant is not only the local jobs and the bounce from the build of the construction industry, but the school districts and the tax base and the benefits that stay in the community where the power is being generated, that doesn't go downstate or anywhere else where the consumers go. It's just adding to the resilience and the reliability of our hometown grid, and it also has that financial benefit of hosting a facility that generates.
On this, one is we have heard from Micron, they have said this publicly, that the reason that they chose the location that they did to build the chip fabrication facility was because it's close to the nuclear power plants that have that steady beat, if you would. The quality, the power quality is best when it's close to a very large synchronous generation asset. So that's that's a testament to saying if you have a large or a like synchronous generation with excess capacity, you're going to attract industry to your neighborhood. And second point, which is related, is in Georgia, where we built the first two 1 gigawatt nuclear plants in a generation, the amount of industrial capacity that has flocked to that region far surpasses the industrial capacity that has come to other parts of the US. Even in the South, where there's tax benefits and other reasons that people are kind of rebuilding. So there's a study by the, can't believe the Southern, Keith, do you remember?
Southern Company is the company.
Not the Southern Company. There's a industry group that did the independent study, and I'll look it up if you want. I can give you this analysis. We can look it up. But they independently evaluated and saw that having firm, clean generation growth attracts industry and jobs to your neighborhood.
If I may add, just on the data centers, we're really talking about data centers to support AI growth for drug discovery and the variety of uses that, when you use ChatGPT, to differentiate from crypto mining, which is completely separate, and actually we've had a bad experience with it in upstate New York. So we really want to make sure that we dissociate crypto mining from AI data centers, which are here to stay, and obviously pay a lot of tax revenue.
All right, I got one last one. I'm going to go around, try to be brief as best as you can. What is your favorite thing about nuclear energy?
You start down there.
No, you're up first.
I'm up first, huh?
Yeah.
It's part of the mix. It's an important part of the mix to have that base load generation, and you certainly, and we've heard the case made that nuclear is the option for carbon-free base load. So that's my favorite thing, yes. Well, yeah, grid reliability, I said grid reliability is top. If we can get there with nuclear, and I think we're on, then that's it.
I'm also going to briefly say reliability, and it's not only from the generation standpoint, reliability in a community, reliability that we have somewhere to go to work and earn a living, reliability, long-term planning for governments and municipalities that host these facilities, where you have strategic planning where you don't have the ups and downs. It just took the peak out of your economics.
We define the economy and value it based on the allocation of scarce resources. What I love about nuclear is that it finally creates abundance. And this energy crisis, if we had really pioneered and innovated in nuclear, would have been already solved 50 years ago. And our priorities would be completely elsewhere in curing diseases. And so the quicker we can get back on that curve of progress with nuclear, the quicker we as a civilization can focus on other things. But the people is my favorite part.
For me, it's energy density and the potential economic impact on the community that it comes to.
I'm going to channel Uncle Ben and say, with infinite power comes infinite responsibility.
So for me, it's energy density. It's like I said before, as an engineer, I support nuclear because I know we need it. As an environmentalist, I love nuclear because it lets you tackle climate change while not destroying nature.
I'll answer this too myself, since I'm ending. I really want to support solutions that reduce impact on the environment, but without lowering quality of life at all. And I think that the secret to lifting people out of poverty is providing more and more reliable energy. And we all want better lives for ourselves and our kids and our grandkids. And so we can't lose sight of that. So that's why I love nuclear energy so much. With that, I want to thank Assemblyman Scott Gray so much for helping to put this together, and Clarkson University, all of our panelists, and to all of you for coming out so late. We'll stick around if you have any more questions. Thank you so much.